There is a question I get asked constantly. At conferences in London, at dinners in Washington, at research seminars in Singapore. The question always comes after I've talked about India's rise, after I've walked through the demographics and the manufacturing and the geopolitical positioning. Someone in the room raises their hand and asks it. Okay, but can India really do tech? Real tech? Not call centers, not IT outsourcing, not maintaining legacy code for American banks. Real innovation, frontier AI, semiconductors, the kind of technology that reshapes the world. And I always pause before answering, not because I'm uncertain, because the honest answer requires dismantling an assumption so deeply embedded in how the West thinks about India that most people don't even realize they're making it. The assumption is this: India is a service economy, a back office, a place where smart people do the technical work that American and European companies design. Good at execution, not at invention. Good at scale, not at originality. That assumption was never fully accurate, and now it is dangerously, consequentially wrong. India is not becoming a tech power. India already is one. The question is whether the rest of the world will realize it before India's technological rise reshapes the global economy in ways nobody planned for. I'm Kaiju Jin, economist at the London School of Economics, born in Beijing, 1983. I watched China build a tech sector from nothing. I watched Shenzhen go from a fishing village to the hardware capital of the world in 30 years. I watched Alibaba and Tencent and Huawei become global forces. I know what a technology revolution looks like in its early stages, when it's still being dismissed, when the experts are still saying it can't be real. India's tech revolution is real, and we're in those early stages right now. Parts 1 and 2 of this series covered India's economic rise and the India-China rivalry. If you haven't watched those, links are in the description. Watch them first. This part stands alone, but it makes more sense with the context. Today I want to tell you about something more specific, something that gets less attention than the GDP numbers or the border conflicts. I want to tell you about what is happening in the laboratories and the startup hubs and the engineering colleges of India right now, and why it matters more than almost anything else in the global economy. From call centers to code, let me start with the origin story, because to understand where India's tech sector is going, you have to understand where it came from. And the real story is more interesting than the version most people know. The standard narrative goes like this. India got lucky. In the 1990s, Y2K happened. Western companies needed cheap programmers to fix their legacy code before the millennium bug crashed their systems. India had English-speaking engineers who could do it cheaply. Infosys and Wipro and TCS scaled up overnight. And from that accidental foundation, Indian IT outsourcing was born. There's truth in this, but it misses the deeper logic. Because the question isn't why India had cheap engineers in the 1990s. The question is why India had engineers at all. Go back further. 1951, independent India. Jawaharlal Nehru makes a decision that will shape the country for generations. He looks at the wreckage of colonialism, the poverty, the illiteracy, the crumbling infrastructure. And he decides that the path forward is science and technology. He builds the Indian Institutes of Technology, the IITs, 7 of them initially, modeled on MIT. Rigorous, competitive, the best engineering education in Asia. The entrance exam for the IITs became, and remains, the hardest undergraduate admission test in the world. Harder than getting into Harvard, harder than Oxford. Over 1 million students sit the exam every year. Fewer than 2% get in. The students who survive that filter are genuinely extraordinary, not just by Indian standards, by any standard. For decades, most of them left. The brain drain was severe. IIT graduates went to the United States, to Silicon Valley, to Wall Street, to European research labs. They built companies, won Nobel Prizes, ran global corporations. And India watched them leave and felt the loss. But here's what India did not fully appreciate at the time. Those engineers who left were not gone. They were building networks, building capital, building credibility, learning how the global technology economy worked from the inside. And they were maintaining connections to home, the diaspora advantage. Let me tell you about a pattern I've observed across 3 decades of studying Asian development. The countries that produce the most successful technology sectors share one characteristic that rarely gets discussed in economic textbooks: a high-quality diaspora that eventually comes home. Japan in the Meiji era. Chinese engineers trained in America who returned to build semiconductor fabs in Taiwan. Korean engineers from Bell Labs who went back to Seoul and built Samsung's chip division. In every case, the diaspora was the bridge. The people who understood both worlds, who spoke both languages, who could take knowledge from the frontier and apply it in the home context. India has the most powerful technology diaspora in the world, not arguably, by any measure. The statistics are staggering. Indian Americans lead more Fortune 500 companies than any other immigrant group. Sundar Pichai at Google, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, Shantanu Narayan at Adobe, Arvind Krishna at IBM. These are not ceremonial appointments. These are the people running the technology that runs the world. They understand how the most sophisticated tech ecosystem on Earth operates. They have spent decades inside it. And increasingly, they are turning back toward India, not just to invest, though Indian origin venture capital flowing back into India is now measured in tens of billions annually, but to build, to hire, to locate research centers. Google's largest engineering office outside the United States is in Bangalore. Microsoft's second largest research lab is in Hyderabad. Amazon's biggest non-American workforce is Indian. These are not coincidences. These are strategic decisions made by people who understand both the talent pool and the market. And the engineers who stayed in India, who didn't take the Silicon Valley path, they've been building something the diaspora always understood, but outsiders consistently underestimated: infrastructure for 1 billion people. The stack that runs 1 billion lives. I want to spend time on something that most technology analysis of India completely skips over, because it's not flashy. It doesn't generate headlines. It doesn't involve billion-dollar valuations or celebrity founders. But it is, in my assessment, the most significant technology achievement of the 21st century so far: India Stack. India Stack is the collective name for the set of digital public infrastructure that the Indian government has built over the past 15 years. Aadhaar, the biometric identity system for 1.4 billion people. UPI, the Unified Payments Interface. DigiLocker, the Digital Document Vault. ONDC, the Open Network for Digital Commerce. Account Aggregator, the Financial Data Sharing Framework. Beacon Protocol, the open mobility and commerce layer. Each of these sounds technical. Each of them is individually impressive. Together, they represent something that has never existed before in human history: a complete digital operating system for a nation state at the scale of a continent. Let me make this concrete. Before Aadhaar, 400 million Indians had no verifiable identity. None. No birth certificate, no government ID, no way to open a bank account, access welfare, prove who they were. In the digital economy, without identity, you don't exist. You can't participate, you can't transact, you can't be served. Aadhaar solved this. Biometric enrollment, fingerprints, iris scans, demographic data. 1.4 billion people enrolled in 5 years. the largest identity project in human history, completed not by a tech giant with unlimited resources, but by a government agency with a budget constraint and a political deadline. Then UPI. I talked about UPI in part 1, but I want to go deeper here because the technology dimension is underappreciated. UPI is not just a payments app, it is an open protocol. Like HTTP is the protocol that allows any computer to talk to any website, UPI is the protocol that allows any bank, any app, any merchant, any person to transact with any other bank, app, merchant, or person, instantly, for free. In 2025, UPI processed 100 billion transactions worth $2 trillion. To put that in context, PayPal processes about 6 billion transactions a year. Visa processes about 200 billion globally. India's single domestic payment network is already running at half the volume of Visa, in one country, and it's growing at 40% annually. But here is the part that should terrify every fintech executive in San Francisco and London. India is exporting UPI. Singapore, UAE, France, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Mauritius. These countries are adopting UPI not because India told them to, because it works better than what they had, because it's open, interoperable, and free. India didn't just build digital infrastructure for itself. It built a template that the world is now copying. That is not what a back-office economy does. That is what a technology leader does. India's AI moment. Now let's get to the part that keeps me up at night, in the good way. The way that makes you realize you are watching history happen in real time. Artificial intelligence. The common narrative about global AI is simple. The United States is leading, China is catching up, everyone else is watching. That narrative is about 18 months out of date. India has entered the AI race, not cautiously, not timidly, with the specific advantages that only India can bring to this competition. And those advantages are more significant than almost anyone in the Western AI community wants to acknowledge. Let me explain what I mean by advantages. AI development requires 3 things: data, compute, talent. On compute, the United States still leads. NVIDIA's chips, the most powerful AI training hardware in the world, flow primarily to American companies. China is being cut off from advanced chips by export controls. India is buying chips. Not at American scale yet, but the investment is accelerating. On talent, India is arguably already winning. Not in terms of the absolute number of AI researchers, the US and China both have more, but in terms of the pipeline. Indian students represent the largest foreign contingent at every top American AI research program. MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, Berkeley. The graduate students doing the actual research, building the actual models, writing the actual papers that advance the field. A disproportionate number of them are Indian. And increasingly, they're going home after graduation. But data. Data is where India's advantage is truly extraordinary, and almost nobody is talking about it. The world's AI problem. Let me explain something about how AI models are built. The large language models, the image generators, the voice systems, all of them are trained on data, human-generated data. Text, images, audio, video, behavioral patterns. The more diverse and representative the training data, the more capable and generalizable the model. Here is the problem with current AI development. Almost all of it is trained on English language data from Western contexts. The internet, as it existed when these models were trained, was predominantly American. The text was American. The cultural references were American. The assumptions were American. The problems being solved were American problems. This creates AI systems that work brilliantly for the 400 million native English speakers on Earth. and work progressively worse for the other 7.6 billion people. India has 22 officially recognized languages, over 1,600 dialects. Hindi, Bengali, Telugu, Marathi, Tamil, Urdu, Gujarati, Kannada, each with its own script, its own phonology, its own cultural context. 900 million smartphone users generating data in these languages, transacting in these languages, speaking to voice assistants in these languages. For a long time, this was seen as a problem. How do you build AI for a country this linguistically complex? How do you serve users who speak Tamil in Chennai and Bhojpuri in Bihar and Kashmiri in Srinagar? Indian AI researchers flipped the question. They stopped seeing linguistic diversity as a problem and started seeing it as a superpower. If you can build AI that works across 22 languages with different scripts and different structures, you have solved the hardest localization problem in the world. And the solution scales, not just to India, to all 200 countries that are currently being underserved by English-centric AI. The projects coming out of Indian AI labs right now are breathtaking in their ambition and their practicality. Bharat GPT, an LLM trained specifically on Indian languages and Indian contexts, not a translation of an English model, a model built from the ground up on Indian data. AI Vani, voice AI that understands Indian accented English across 50 regional variants, plus 11 Indian languages, plus code switching, the way people mix Hindi and English in actual conversation, which no American model handles gracefully. Jugalbandi, an AI system built specifically for low literacy users, not text-based, voice-based, designed for a farmer in Madhya Pradesh who cannot read but has a smartphone, can answer questions about crop disease, government welfare schemes, weather forecasts, in the farmer's own language, in voice, with no literacy requirement. This last one deserves emphasis. Silicon Valley builds AI for people who already have everything: fast internet, high literacy, English fluency, credit cards. Jugalbandi builds AI for the person who has none of those things, but has a cheap Android phone and a voice. That is not a niche application. That is a solution for 4 billion people. The semiconductor gamble. In part 2, I mentioned India's $10 billion semiconductor incentive package. I want to go deeper here because the technology implications are profound. Semiconductors are the oil of the 21st century. Every analyst says this. It's become a cliché. But clichés become clichés because they're true. Without advanced chips, you cannot build AI. You cannot run modern military systems. You cannot power the digital economy. The country that controls chip manufacturing controls the technological future. Right now, the chip supply chain is terrifyingly concentrated. TSMC in Taiwan makes 90% of the world's most advanced chips. ASML in the Netherlands makes 100% of the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines needed to make those chips. Samsung in South Korea makes most of the rest. 3 countries, 3 companies. The entire foundation of the global digital economy. The United States understands this is a vulnerability. That's why the CHIPS Act. That's why the export controls on China. They are trying to reshore chip manufacturing and prevent China from accessing the technology to build its own. India looked at this situation and saw an opportunity. Not to build a TSMC competitor immediately, that would take 20 years and $1 trillion, but to insert itself into the supply chain at the right points: assembly, testing, packaging, the downstream end of chip manufacturing, where the margins are lower, but the strategic value is real. The Tata Group, India's largest conglomerate, announced an $11 billion chip fabrication plant in Gujarat. Micron, the American memory chip maker, announced a $2.75 billion assembly and testing facility in Gujarat with Indian government co-investment. CG Power and Renesas are building another facility in Sanand. By 2026, India had multiple semiconductor facilities under construction simultaneously, none of them at the bleeding edge of fabrication. All of them at the level India needs to establish presence, build skills, attract more investment. The playbook is the same one Taiwan used in the 1970s. Start with assembly, build the workforce, master the processes, then move up the value chain. Taiwan went from assembling chips to designing and fabricating the world's most advanced chips in 40 years. India is trying to do it in 15. Aggressive, possibly unrealistic, but the trajectory is set. And here is the geopolitical logic that makes this more than just industrial policy. Every chip assembled in India is one less chip assembled in a country that the United States is in conflict with or dependent on. India is positioning itself as the trusted alternative in a supply chain that the entire Western world is desperately trying to diversify. That is not just good economics. That is geopolitical leverage of the highest order. The 100 unicorns. Let me address something that gets a lot of coverage but is often misunderstood: India's startup ecosystem. By 2025, India had over 100 unicorns, companies valued at over $1 billion, third most in the world after the United States and China. This fact gets cited constantly as evidence of India's tech rise. But the number itself is less interesting than what it represents. In the early 2010s, Indian startups were mostly copies. Flipkart was Amazon for India. Ola was Uber for India. Paytm was PayPal for India. The model was take a proven Western business model, localize it for Indian conditions, scale it with cheaper unit economics. This worked. It created enormous companies. It built an ecosystem of engineers, investors, founders. But something shifted around 2018. A new generation of startups stopped copying Western models and started building for problems that Western companies had never encountered and had no interest in solving. Zepto, grocery delivery in 10 minutes. Not 30, not same day, 10 minutes. Built for Indian cities where traffic is impossible, but population density means a warehouse can be 500 meters from 1 million potential customers. The logistics innovation required to make this work is extraordinary. It doesn't translate directly to New York or London, but the model is being studied by delivery companies worldwide. NinjaCart, agricultural supply chain technology, connecting 800,000 Indian farmers directly to retailers, cutting out 5 layers of middlemen. The farmers earn more, the retailers pay less, the food gets to market faster with less waste. This problem, the broken agricultural supply chain that keeps farmers poor and food expensive, exists in 80 countries. The solution, built for India's scale and complexity, works everywhere. Karya, ethical AI data collection. Building training datasets for AI by hiring rural Indian workers at fair wages to transcribe audio, label images, record speech in regional languages. The workers get meaningful income. The AI companies get high-quality, diverse data. The model is profitable without exploitation. It's being copied by companies in Kenya, Bangladesh, the Philippines. These are not Indian versions of American ideas. These are original solutions to real problems at global scale. That is the definition of technological innovation. Why Silicon Valley is quietly terrified. I want to say something that might sound provocative, but is actually just descriptive. Silicon Valley is scared of India. Not in the way it's scared of China, where the fear is geopolitical and about state-backed competition. It's a different kind of fear, quieter, more existential. The fear is this: the assumptions that built Silicon Valley are becoming wrong, and India is what wrong looks like in practice. Silicon Valley was built on several foundational assumptions: that the most valuable users are affluent English speakers, that the best engineers are in the Bay Area or can be imported to it, that the most important problems to solve are the ones felt by people who already have a lot and want more. That scale means American scale, and then maybe European scale, and then maybe, eventually, everywhere else. India violates every one of these assumptions simultaneously. India's most valuable users have $5 of disposable income per day, not $500. They're more valuable not because they're richer, but because there are a billion of them, and they're all coming online simultaneously. The engineers in Bangalore and Hyderabad and Pune are as good as the ones in San Francisco, cost 60% less, and increasingly refuse to relocate. The most important problems are not about productivity apps for knowledge workers. They're about feeding 800 million farmers, banking 400 million previously unbanked adults, educating 300 million children who've never had a decent school.